The Nubian morning sun spread a layer of golden light over the majestic sandstone mountains, where the royal architects stood beside Pharaoh Ramesses II to survey the site. When they placed their hands on the rock surface, feeling its solidity and observing the characteristic red-gold veins of this land, they understood immediately that the mountain was not only the foundation, but also the very material of the monument. Instead of transporting massive stone blocks from elsewhere, Ramesses II decided to let the mountain itself become the body of the temple, a bold choice reserved only for the grandest constructions. Nubian sandstone was hard enough to maintain its form, yet soft enough to carve statues and engravings. From Upper Egypt to Lower Egypt, supporting materials were brought in: cedar wood from the north to build scaffolding, copper and bronze to forge chisels and hammers, quartz stone for ultra-durable chisel tips, and dried Nile sand to polish surfaces. All were gathered here for a single ambition: to transform the Nubian frontier into a symbol of Egypt's power. Along the road from the river dock to the mountain foot, lines of workers stretched out like diligent ants. Long cedar logs from Lebanon were placed on sledges with a layer of wet sand beneath to reduce friction during transport. Wooden chests containing chisels, axes, hammers, and papyrus measuring cords were tightly bound with ropes and moved in batches. Supervisors continuously shouted commands to keep the teams in sync, preventing the sledges from tipping or breaking their axles. As noon approached and the sun grew harsher, materials had to be covered with large cloth sheets to prevent the heat from warping the wood or making chisel tips brittle. Whenever a transport convoy passed, Nubian villagers on both sides of the road paused to watch, for no construction had ever mobilized such a vast workforce. The worksite gradually took shape, with tool forging zones, storage areas, workers' shelters, and a dedicated section for the royal architects. Everything operated like a colossal machine, tirelessly from dawn until nightfall.
They are bringing the sacred wood.
Hail the Pharaoh!
When the cedar wood scaffolding was finally erected, rising like a giant wall clinging to the mountain, the finest artisans began carving the temple facade. Each strike of stone hammer against sandstone rang out in rapid succession, shaping the preliminary forms of the 4 colossal statues of Ramesses II. At first, they were but rough stone masses, but day by day, the pharaoh's eyes, nose, and lips gradually emerged, sharp and majestic. The sculptors stood precariously on the scaffolding, holding sharpened bronze chisels and tapping lightly to refine the folds of the Nemes headdress or the gentle curves of the lips. Under the sun, which sometimes reached 45 degrees Celsius, they constantly wetted the statue surfaces with cloth to prevent heat expansion from causing cracks. Once the heads were completed, they gradually worked downward, carving the torsos, the arms resting firmly on the knees, and the massive legs supporting the entire statue. Thus, the 4 nearly 20-meter-high figures rose from the heart of the mountain as though the rock itself were awakening at the command of Ramesses II. While the outside echoed with the thunderous sounds of carving, the interior of the mountain was another world, quieter, yet far more intense. Work crews rotated to excavate meter by meter, opening the entrance into the temple. They used the technique of inserting dry wooden wedges into natural cracks, then soaking them with water so the expanding wood would create pressure and split the rock into large slabs. These slabs were hauled out on sledges, while smaller fragments were shaped with finer chisels. The interior spaces remained dark, illuminated only by oil lamps hung along the walls to guide the workers. After many months, a corridor more than 60 meters long was carved out, leading to ritual chambers. Falling rock accumulated in layers, leaving behind an entirely new architectural space emerging from the solid mountain that had stood unchanged for thousands of years. From this main corridor, artisans expanded side chambers, the grand columned hall, the vestibule, and at the deepest point, the sanctuary. Once the entrance was opened, and the sunlight from outside became no more than a thin thread on the floor, the artisans began their most important task, creating a divine world within the mountain. The interior was divided into multiple layers, each with its own layout, height, axis orientation, and ceremonial function. Every detail determined through calculations so precise they seem unbelievable, performed with nothing more than papyrus cords, sunlight, and the shadows cast on stone. Stepping through the first threshold, one encounters the great columned hall, the heart of the first architectural layer. The ceiling rose so high that even with oil lamps burning brightly, their flames could not illuminate the entire stone surface above. Two massive rows of columns stretched the length of the chamber, each column not a built structure, but a statue of Ramses II in the form of Osiris, carved directly from the mountain's solid rock. His arms were crossed over his chest, his feet stood firmly, and every contour of his body was sculpted with meticulous attention to the folds of the garment. The artisans spent months shaping the curve of the shoulders, adjusting the tilt of the crown, and engraving every line of the ceremonial robe. These columns supported the entire weight of the mountain above, yet thanks to the parallel excavation technique, they stood firm without a single crack. On the walls of the Great Hall, enormous relief panels were created following strict principles. Deep carving to produce shadows, shallow carving for layers of clothing, and polished surfaces to reflect sunlight in the mornings. The scene of Ramses II riding his chariot in the Battle of Kadesh was sculpted with 8 layers of figures: infantry, cavalry, shield bearers, fallen enemies underfoot, spear points, arrows flying off bowstrings, tilting chariots, and clouds of stone dust, all combined into a dynamic movement that felt as if the battle were unfolding inside this dark chamber. Venturing deeper, past the narrow corridor leading to the vestibule, one steps into a smaller but far more refined space. Here, the giant column statues disappear, replaced by a series of ceremonial reliefs, Ramses II offering tributes, Nefertari participating in sacred rites. and the royal princes and princesses following solemnly in procession. The ceiling was flattened and then polished with fine sand until it resembled a perfectly smooth stone tablet. Artisans burned oil lamps close to the ceiling to check for any dents or irregularities. Even the slightest imperfection was corrected immediately, for this room prepared the passage into the most sacred of spaces, the sanctuary. The deepest architectural layer was the sanctuary, the soul of the entire monument. This chamber was carved farther into the mountain than any other, with walls meters thick to ensure absolute stability. Inside, 4 seated statues were carved directly from the bedrock, with no joints or signs of assembly. The artisans had to sculpt them exactly at the positions determined by the astronomers, for even the slightest deviation in angle would prevent sunlight from reaching them. Amun-Ra was placed first, with a stern face and towering crown. Beside him was Ra-Horakhti, bearing the solar disk atop his head and a falcon carved behind his neck. The third was Ramses II himself. Deified, his gaze fixed straight toward the entrance as if awaiting the sun to awaken him. And finally, shrouded in perpetual darkness, was Ptah, the god of night and primordial creation. Each figure was carved with a depth of more than 30 centimeters to create sharp, dramatic shadows, allowing their faces to appear clearly even in dim light. Within the temple, the reliefs depicting the Battle of Kadesh and the victories of Ramses II served as a form of visual propaganda record. Through every chiseled detail, civilians and soldiers alike could witness the pharaoh's might, him fighting in the heart of battle, striking the Hittite army, or receiving the divine mandate from the gods. These images were not mere decoration, they were tools to inspire national pride and strengthen loyalty. The architectural axis of the sanctuary was established by measuring the sun's shadow over many years. Architects erected a stone pillar before the temple entrance and observed its shadow each morning throughout different times of the year. From this, they determined the path of sunlight as it would pass through the gate, down the corridor, across the columned hall, and into the sanctuary. Whenever test light beams deviated slightly left or right, they adjusted the height and angle of the axial room, even modifying the subtle curvature of the walls so the light would not be absorbed before reaching its destination. When everything was in place, when every wall had been polished smooth and every relief cleared of dust, the priests and architects gathered before the temple on the morning they had calculated, months in advance. As the sun rose, its golden light shot straight through the entrance, sweeping along the deep corridor. A narrow blade of light slowly advanced into the sanctuary. Then it touched the statue of Amun-Ra, next Ra-Horakhti, then Ramses II. The 3 statues glowed as though gilded in gold, while Ptah remained motionless in eternal darkness. The craftsmen cried out in triumph, the priests fell to their knees, and the officials bowed their heads before the success of a monument created through the union of nature and human mastery. From that moment, the Nubian mountain ceased to be a mere mass of stone. It became a temple with a soul, enduring with time and with the power of Ramses II.